Before I start this match, I would just like to point out that I am aware that this fight technically happened before, yet there were multiple circumstances involved. For one, Kun had the aid of Kip Duron during the fight with Luke, and the battle took place on Yavin 4, which is known to be a dark side nexus, so needless to say, the fight wasn't on even ground. This match is to see how these combatants prefer against each other on neutral ground. With that out of the way, please enjoy Exar Kun vs Luke Skywalker. Born approximately 4,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, Exar Kun was considered to be the greatest student of the renowned combat instructor Vodo Siosk Bas. However, Kun ultimately rebelled against his teacher and order in a bid for forbidden knowledge that he craved due to his fascination with ancient Sith lore, and his learning of such knowledge and power was initiated by the spirit of the ancient Sith Frieden Nad. Kun would come into a brief conflict with the leader of the Krath and now Dark Jedi Hulick Keldroma. Ultimately, their confrontation was cut short by a group of Sith spirits that anointed Exar as the new reigning Dark Lord of the Sith and Hulick his apprentice. Kun would instigate the Great Sith War, which devastated the galaxy for 2 years, and he succeeded in corrupting many of the latest generation of Jedi to his side. Alongside this, he also killed his former master after a heated battle within the Senate chambers. Unfortunately for him, as is the way of the Sith, betrayal caught up to him, and Hulick revealed his master's hidden location on Yavin 4. Exar began a ritual to transform himself into a Sith spirit, but he was imprisoned on the planet by the Jedi who had now created a barrier of light-side energy, which left him trapped for 4 millennia. Once Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Praxium was made a reality on the planet, Kun awoke and began to terrorize the organization. However, with the aid of the spirit of Vodo Bas, the Jedi were able to fight back, and Exar Kun was finally erased from the plane of existence. Roughly 1,000 years after the establishment of Darth Bane's rule of 2, the Sith's grand plan for the extermination of the Jedi was instigated by the newly galactic Emperor, Darth Sidious, which he achieved with the aid of his latest apprentice Darth Vader, formerly the Chosen One of the Force, Anakin Skywalker. Unknown to the Sith, however, Anakin's former lover Padme Amidala gave birth to twins, a girl named Leia and a boy named Luke, the latter of which became known as the New Hope. This New Hope was raised with his aunt and uncle on Tatooine, whilst secretly being watched over by the exiled Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, Vader's former Jedi mentor. 19 years later, Luke inadvertently delivered a plea for help from his sister to Kenobi. In a twist of events, Luke joined Obi-Wan, hoping for the quest for adventure that he'd always dreamed of, and to start his tutelage as a Jedi Knight. Throughout his campaign, Luke became one of the rebellion's most promising enforcers, and along the way, endured many trials and tribulations, such as the death of Kenobi at Vader's hand, the realization of the horrible truth that Vader was his father, and lastly, the struggle that led him to redeem his dad, which in turn allowed the now redeemed Anakin to achieve his destiny as the Chosen One, and bring balance to the Force. After this great success, Luke continued to aid his friends and colleagues against the remnants of the Empire and participated in numerous campaigns, such as the campaign of Grand Admiral Thrawn and the rebirth of the once thought dead Palpatine. Luke eventually recreated the Jedi Order and became its Grand Master. Luke Skywalker is remembered for his unwavering bravery and heroism, along with his unshakable ability to always see the good in those who were thought to be lost to the inner darkness.
Round 1.
Exar Kun is a human male remaining in the prime of his life. He was aged roughly in his mid to late 20s and possessed an athletic build. Kun's strength was phenomenal. When bolstered by physical augmentation, his lightsaber blows have been known to have enough force behind them to send shockwaves that could be heard for kilometers. In addition, he's been known to break through Vodo Bas's force-imbued staff, crushing a Sith holocron with his grip, and most impressively, he has punched his way through a wall of Mandalorian iron, a material so very dense and durable that it possessed a resistance to lightsabers. Kun's speed and agility were also extremely impressive. Before his prime, he was able to keep up with the talented Jedi Knight Silvar, a considerable feat when we take into account that Silvar could move faster than Nomi Sunrider could react. By the time of his prime, he has been known to outpace the likes of Hulick Keldroma. Kun's endurance and durability were excellent. He has been credited in the Dark Side sourcebook as being able to fight for hours during his stalemate with Keldroma. Kun has also been known to be crushed beneath tons of rock and hold out long enough for Frieden now to heal him. Obviously, physical strikes aren't going to be enough to bring down Kun unless you pummel him into a bloody pulp. All in all, Exar Kun is one of the most physically imposing Sith in the history of the Sith Order. During the events of the Dark Empire comic series, Luke Skywalker was a human male aged roughly in his early 30s. His physical capability, even in his younger days, was largely impressive. During the time of Return of the Jedi, Luke possessed strength enough to compete evenly with Darth Vader, something that shocked the Sith Lord himself. At the time of Dark Empire, this strength had increased considerably, as he was able to compete in a strength-based saber-lock with Darth Sidious. A feat made all the more impressive considering that Sidious has displayed strength enough to fend off the combined might of Darth Maul and Savage Opress. Two beings with strength already comparable to Vader. Luke's speed and agility were also very worthy of note. He's displayed agility and reflexes enough to slice off the front of an Imperial speeder bike, and makes excellent use of this agility when fighting, often employing acrobatics to give him greater position. He's used his speed to cover the entire distance of a Star Destroyer within seconds, and has dodged an explosion whilst poisoned, and has briefly kept pace with Palpatine, despite the fact that the Emperor has been described as moving too fast for an enraged Darth Maul to see, and has appeared to flicker in and out of existence from the point of view of Anakin Skywalker. Alongside this, Luke's endurance was excellent. During his training under the ancient Jedi Master Yoda, he was able to maintain handstands for hours, despite also having to balance Yoda on his foot and levitate several objects. He's been seen continuing to fight optimally despite being pummeled with multiple loose objects during his fight with Vader on Bespin. After refusing to kill his father and being submitted for an extended period of time to the Force lightning of Sidious, Luke was able to immediately tend to his father as if he had never been touched, and was able to drag his father to a hangar. He's continued to display this endurance to greater degrees after the events of the movies, proceeding to fight after tanking physical strikes with no ill effect, and getting up after being struck by the lightning of an even more powerful Sidious. And finally, Luke's right hand was replaced by a prosthetic after a failed duel with his father, which provided a certain degree of enhanced durability, but ultimately functioned just the same as a regular one. All in all, Luke Skywalker was a very impressive combatant on the basis of his physical abilities alone. Any opponent will be hard pressed to challenge him in this regard. While Exar Kun is indeed physically imposing, and has made excellent use of his strength and manual dexterity, Luke possesses boons in the fact that he simply possesses these traits to a greater degree. Plus, he ultimately makes greater combative use of his speed and agility. This isn't to say that Kun will get speed blitzed, as this isn't Luke's typical MO, but it is still an advantage to make note of, as Luke's greater inclination to use this speed will enhance his ability to maintain control over his opponent, forcing Kun to keep on his toes. Luke Skywalker gets the physical edge.
Round 2.
Exar Kun was a master of lightsaber combat, considered to be Vodo Bass's greatest student, having bested his master during several sparring matches, and has been stated as a master duelist in the Dark Side sourcebook. His entry in the Tales of the Jedi campaign guide confirms that Exar Kun is a specialist in the 6th form of lightsaber combat, also known as Nyman. A jack-of-all-trades style, Nyman was a style that incorporated elements of all previous forms into one well-rounded fighting style. Nyman was designed to allow its practitioners to maintain a decent level of effectiveness in combat with relatively little need for study and practice, so they could divert their attention to other studies, such as diplomacy or studies of the Force. Kun took this style to a near unparalleled level, and as such became extremely adaptable in combat. While Nyman is known to provide specialist training in the use of incorporated force maneuvers, this is a fighting technique that Exar has never been seen making use of. Although, given his mastery of his chosen style, it's logical to assume that he did possess a knowledge of this technique. When applying the use of a standard saber, Exar Kun has been witnessed implementing his physical might into his overall offensive through the use of unarmed strikes, bolstering his combative effectiveness. However, when employing the use of his saber staff, Kun's lightsaber technique is known to be rather unorthodox. The Essential Guide to Weapons and Technology makes note of how Kun created his own unique fighting style. He would often take advantage of the numerous blade adjustment settings within his weapon's hilt, alternating between different power settings and adjusting the lengths of his blades. The guide goes on to further make note that Exar would trick his opponents into overextending themselves before he makes use of a deadly and deceptive counterattack. A good example of Kun's use of such tactics comes from his final serious engagement with his former master. At the battle's start, Kun applied the much more conventional uses of Nyman through what looked like a standard lightsaber, to the point where he and Vodo appeared to be evenly matched. Then, partway through the duel, Kun revealed his saber staff and remained in complete control of the fight, eventually driving his master back and cutting him down. Moreover, Kun has also been credited and demonstrated a mastery in the use of dual blade fencing, more than likely a holdover from Nyman, as the form is known to provide its students with training in this style of fighting, should one wish to learn it. Kun used this style of fighting to great effect against his master Vodo Bass during their last sparring match. All of this combative skill has granted Exar Kun a very significant degree of combative effectiveness, having defeated several Jedi Knights along with his former master Vodo Bass, and even stalemated the renowned swordmaster Hulick Keldroma. Exar Kun's place as a legendary swordsman is well earned. A lightsaber prodigy, Luke Skywalker inherited his father's aptitude for becoming immensely skilled with the lightsaber over the course of just a few years, his strength in the Force providing him with his natural aptitude for quick learning. This is what allowed him to briefly hold his own against Celeste Swan and a pair of Magna Guards with little to no training. This is further evidenced by the statement made within his Fight Saber article, which goes on to state that an observing master would be astonished by Luke's instantaneous learning in battle. This essentially allowed Luke to adapt to the chosen style of virtually anyone he fought, no matter how unorthodox or unconventional their approach to combat may be, his strength in the Force awarding him the perception required for such a technique. After all, this perception is what allowed him to achieve the aforementioned feats of skill, along with his ability to destroy the Death Star and deflect blaster fire with no training. Even before the events of Dark Empire, Luke was already considered to be a formidable duelist, regarded by Vader as the best challenger he'd had in years. Luke, like his father, was a specialist in the fifth form of lightsaber combat, mastering both the Xi'an and Jijemso variations. The fifth form was created to answer Form 3's lack of offense, with the Xi'an variant being optimized for blast deflection, and Jemso intended for lightsaber dueling, placing a heavy focus on the use of heavy-handed power blows. However, Luke did not become over-specialized. His entry within the Jedi Path states that Yoda instructed him in the applications of Ataru during their training on Dagobah, and he was believed to learn the principles of Form 3 Surisu from Kenobi's journal. While Luke's final confrontation with Vader had initially had certain circumstances involved, the most notable being Vader's confliction, which has led many to believe that he wasn't fighting all out, Luke did not also go all out until he became enraged, as shown by how he kept putting his lightsaber away and refusing to fight, which essentially counterbalanced Vader's confliction.
I will not fight you, Father. I will not fight you.
Even then, the Return of the Jedi novel notes that Vader felt humiliated by Luke's ability to challenge him so well, and that he was indeed willing to use all his skills to kill his son. After the events of the movies, Luke became nothing short of devastating with the blade. During the events of Dark Empire, Luke was able to briefly hold his own against the deadly Sith Lord Darth Sidious, a Sith so very skilled that he had been confirmed to maintain unwavering superiority over Darth Maul and Savage Opress, to the point where he had been officially confirmed to be toying with Maul after killing his brother. And of course, he was able to drive back a heavily vapid-amped Mace Windu and stalemate Jedi Grandmaster Yoda, who was considered by many and has been officially noted as the greatest warrior of the time of the prequels. During Luke's second battle with Sidious, he managed to swiftly defeat the Dark Lord, although he did have Leia's battle meditation for aid. Despite this, Luke's ability to go toe-to-toe with some of the most deadly and devastating duelists in history is a testament to his own skills. Overall, Luke Skywalker was a phenomenal duelist, capable of adapting to virtually any opponent's style, and his astounding physical prowess and extensive experience made for an impeccable combat performance. While I do consider this section to be easy enough to call, it is still an interesting comparison to say the least. Exar Kun may possess an advantage in his unorthodox fighting style, but Luke has already demonstrated and been confirmed to be able to adapt almost instantaneously to an opponent's style, and this was before he achieved a significantly greater skill as opposed to his younger Return of the Jedi self. Kun may have participated in more lightsaber duels, but as is the case with all versus videos, this is not a numbers game. Also, the majority of foes he has faced, besides Hulick and Vodo, have not been comparable to him in skill. By contrast, Luke has contended and defeated opponents of equal and greater caliber. Any use of incorporated physical strikes would not be enough to subvert Luke's defenses either, as even in his younger, less experienced days, he proved himself capable of continuing to perform optimally, despite having to take a pummeling. So in conclusion, Luke possesses the already natural and now honed ability to adapt to Kun's radical style, and he has demonstrated skill enough to easily place him as a superior fighter, which is of course further accentuated by his greater physical prowess. Luke Skywalker gets the edge as a lightsaber duelist.
Round 3.
Exar Kun is known to be one of the most powerful and knowledgeable Sith Lords in galactic history, and has been noted within the Complete Star Wars Encyclopedia as the most powerful Sith of his lineage, marking him as more powerful than the likes of Freedom Nad, Naga Sadow, and many others. Exar Kun's applications of telekinesis were devastating. In the midst of being healed from being buried alive, Kun unleashed a force scream that was felt by Vodo Bas and Hulick Heldroma among others throughout the entire galaxy. He's been known to ragdoll the likes of Silvar and Corran Horn, the latter of which he achieved whilst in a weakened Sith spirit state, and most impressively, whilst in the same weakened state, he managed to choke 12 of Luke Skywalker's greatest students, although he did catch them off guard, and they eventually managed to break free. Yet this is still a spectacular showing considering that he was in a weakened state due to being a spirit, and thus having less influence over the physical plane, which implies that he's capable of even grander accomplishments when in his physical and power prime. In addition, he's demonstrated an ability to shield himself from damage, as showcased when he was attacked by Odan and retaliated with the use of Force Wound, killing his target internally with a precise telekinetic attack. Among other applications, Kun has been known to use this power to levitate himself down from high distances, and disrupt the currents of air through the use of Force Whirlwind and Ultra Environment. Exar Kun had a great deal of aptitude with telepathy, which only further enhanced his skills as a sorcerer. He's influenced and corrupted the minds of even trained Force sensitives, converting them to his cause, and he's been known to take control of certain individuals such as the teenage Kip Doran, although Kip was largely inexperienced at the time and thus his strength in the Force had not fully developed. Moreover, Exar Kun was well versed in numerous Sith rituals and the use of alchemy, having transformed a Massassi priest into an alchemically enhanced monster, and performed a ritual on himself to transform himself into a Sith spirit, whilst also draining several Massassi of their life force in the process. Kun has also demonstrated large-scale showings of Force stun within the Senate halls, along with the ability to confuse targets with Force illusions. His go-to energy-based power was a blast of dark-side energy that was generated by his gauntlets, previously worn by Naga Sadow. When he used this power for the first time, he was barely able to control it, although the temple he was in was known to be a dark-side nexus, and as such would have amplified his power. At lower intensities, under his control, he's been able to render targets unconscious with a single blast, and he should easily be able to kill with greater impact. Furthermore, Kun is known to have learned and developed skills in Force Lightning, Dark Healing, and Energy Resistance, a subcategory of Tutor Minis. Needless to say, Exar Kun is one of the most well-versed and powerful Sith sorcerers in history. As the son of the Chosen One, Luke Skywalker inherited an extremely potent connection to the Force. By the time of Return of the Jedi, his strength and potential in the Force was feared by Darth Sidious, and Vader regarded his son as potentially more powerful than Anakin. This power only grew greater over the years, to the point where he was considered to be superior to Vader by the end of the Thrawn trilogy, and subsequently grew immensely after such events, leading to that of the Dark Empire series. With little training, Luke displayed telekinesis with enough power to briefly hold up an AT-ST walker, and was able to partially lift his X-Wing out of the water on Dagobah, along with possessing force shields powerful enough to deflect attacks from Vader by the time of Empire Strikes Back. During the events of the Thrawn trilogy, Luke had become powerful enough to casually fly the Millennium Falcon through the use of telekinesis alone. These showings of power are all very well and good, I hear you say, but how does he fare against actual Force users? For that, we will have to turn to his showings within Dark Empire, in which he managed to casually ragdoll Executive Cedris, and was able to successfully land a Force push on the canonically most powerful incarnation of Sidious. It is true that he caught Sidious off guard, yet it does not change the caliber of his opposition. Among other applications, Luke has casually pulled down an AT-AT walker, knocked down a giant statue of Vader, displayed talents with Force Choke along with the ability to block its application, and has imploded several droids. Luke has an awe-inspiring mastery of telepathy, having tricked Han and even Leia into thinking that he was with them when he was actually on Biss, indicating that these images of himself carried enough of his Force signature to fool even trained Force sensitives. This in turn also demonstrated his ability to casually communicate over long distances. But perhaps Luke's most notable use of telepathy was Force Harmony, which he used in turn with his sister to weaken Palpatine, which partially contributed to the Emperor losing control of the Force Storm that he summoned mere moments later. In addition, Skywalker possessed talents in various utility and defensive powers, such as various applications of the healing arts, resist stun, Force barriers, which he has used casually to shield himself from an Imperial Walker blast, and Tutor Minis, which he used to briefly deflect Force lightning from Sidious, implying that he can defend himself more capably from powerful attacks by the time of Dark Empire. So overall, Luke Skywalker was an absolute prodigy of the Force, possessing power enough to dish out some serious harm to even the most legendary of Force users. This is most certainly the closest and difficult section to call. Kun has the greater multitude of powers at his disposal, but as said earlier, this isn't a numbers game. During his life, Kun has never displayed inclinations to use his sorcery and illusions. Even if he were to use them, Luke's already demonstrated a similar affinity for telepathy, and as such wouldn't be fooled by any illusions projected from Kun. Their affinity for telekinetic attacks is more or less comparable. The outliers ultimately fall down to Kun's Force blasts and Luke's Tutor Minis, in which again I don't see a definitive edge, as Kun won't be benefiting from the power of the temple within which he found the gauntlets, and Luke's growth in power from Return of the Jedi, in which he already briefly protected himself from someone superior to Kun in raw power, should decently scale him to be perfectly capable of defending himself from Kun's blasts. In the end, I say there is no clear-cut advantage between the two, as Kun's greater variety is counterbalanced by Luke's greater defensive applications and comparable raw power. I declare both combatants equal as Force wielders.
Round 4.
Exar Kun's lightsaber was of an interesting design. He wielded a saber staff with a rather unorthodox and archaic design. In contrast to the typical saber staff, which possessed a hilt roughly the length of two lightsabers, Exar Kun's weapon featured a hilt only bearing the typical length. This allowed the weapon to be more effectively wielded as a standard weapon, something that Kun often chooses to do when initially entering a confrontation. In addition, the weapon possessed handguards at each end, a dual-phase function that allowed Kun to rapidly switch back and forth between preset blade lengths, potentially attacking with one extended blade while the other is shortened, ultimately granting Kun a greater degree of options. He further accentuates this advantage with implemented switches within the hilt that allowed to adjust the weapon's power settings in combat. Lastly, the weapon featured blue focusing crystals as opposed to the typical red synthetics, which doesn't ultimately make much of a difference in a fight, but it does make the weapon stand out. Overall, Exar Kun's saber staff granted him a multitude of combative benefits that'll be of great benefit to him regardless of who he encounters. Luke was initially bestowed by Obi-Wan with his father's Jedi lightsaber. However, this weapon was lost after his fight with Vader on Bespin. In consequence, Luke was forced to craft a new weapon. which he did with the aid of instructions from Kenobi's journal, which he discovered on Tatooine. As a result, Luke's weapon featured an almost identical design to Kenobi's. The hilt center featured multiple ridges, granting the wielder a tighter grip on the weapon. Luke outfitted his weapon with a green synthetic crystal, as opposed to a typical Adagan one. Ultimately, Luke's weapon, while standard, still provided him with all the combative benefits of a typical lightsaber. Straightforward, but effective. This one is easy enough to decide. While Luke's weapon is in its own right a well-crafted lightsaber, it ultimately doesn't provide any significant advantage in battle, as opposed to Kun's lightsaber, which provides a ton of combative benefits, ultimately providing him with more combative options. Exar Kun is awarded the advantage in weaponry.
Final round.
In a hypothetical battle between Exar Kun and Luke Skywalker, I would say that the advantage to the victor goes 8 to 10. Given how both characters are somewhat disinclined to abuse their powers in single combat, this fight would likely begin and end as a lightsaber duel, with little to minimal use of the Force. When the confrontation begins, Kun would likely attack first. Employing his standard saber, Kun attacks, attempting to overpower his enemy with a flurry of incredibly fast and unrelenting attacks. Luke calmly intercepts and perceives each and every blow, defending himself appropriately until he's comfortable with his enemy's fighting style, and begins to unleash his own dedicated Gemso counter-offensive. As a result, Luke's counters and superior combat speed continuously drive Kun back. Frustrated and desperate, Kun just barely manages to break off and fires a blast of dark energy at his adversary. Luke outstretches his hand and diffuses the blast, but is immediately met by Kun's unorthodox saber staff onslaught, with Kun attempting every trick he can to off-balance the Jedi Master. However, Luke continues to calmly intercept every move and adapt to every trick Kun attempts, once again asserting his control over the fight with his own counters, and applying his superior combat speed and strength to buckle down on Kun.
Then, suddenly... Oh no, this is horrible!
And thus, I declare Luke Skywalker, the New Hope, the winner. Well, ladies and gents, thank you as always for watching. As always, I hope you all enjoyed. Feel free to leave your thoughts down below, and I shall see you all in another video very soon. Goodbye, and may the Force be with you.